What up, Misfits? Welcome to the Misfit Heroes podcast. My name is Chris, and together we are going on a journey. You know, Misfits, when I first started this journey, I thought that I was an expert communicator. I thought I was so connected with people, and that I shared these deep emotional relationships with these people who oftentimes were strangers that I was meeting for the first time. And I still feel that way today, but sometimes I feel I lack that core connection emotionally with others, if I'm being honest. I don't know if you feel that way too, but I'm just being real. Now, I bet you didn't think that you were going to get relationship advice from this podcast, did you? Well, I'm definitely no expert in that arena. I don't really even know the rules of the sport, if I'm being honest. But my guests tonight do. Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill are the authors of the new book, The Connection Codes, the blueprint and tools for the connections you crave. And the concepts from their book have helped me grow interpersonal skills that I thought were already top-notch, but in truth, were a little rusty. Dr. Glenn is a certified sexologist and family therapist, and his work has led to lives and relationships being healed in over 40 countries worldwide. We discuss the core human need of emotional connection, why people are hiding their emotions in our modern society, and how the tools in their studies can make a profound impact on how humans interact with each other in every aspect of life. Misfits, it's time to get all touchy-feely. Please welcome Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill.
Playing the Misfit Heroes podcast.
Well, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, welcome to the Misfit Heroes podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. You know, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to my buddy, Jeff Thompson. He's the guy that introduced us, and I want to tell you that he kept telling me, he's like, "Hey, you really got to meet these people. You got to listen to their book." And I was like, "Okay, Jeff." And I put it off, and then I actually went and I was able to go meet you all, and you started talking and everything made sense.
Wow.
Wow. Thanks.
That's cool. Love it.
So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate your time. I know you guys are busy, so let's just jump right into it. You know, I like I said, I want to say that your book has had really just a tremendous impact on my family, and it's kind of crazy that it's just sort of like a light going off that
Yeah.
I love that.
That the stuff that you guys talk about just makes so much sense to me. But let's stop talking about me. Let's talk about you guys. So you've been married for almost 40 years. How did you guys meet?
Well, that's a fun story. I was 15 and Glenn was 16, and we met at a summer Bible camp.
Yeah. I hit her in the head with a softball.
Yeah.
Literally. And she never recovered.
Yeah.
Everything else happened after that. She was deliriously in love.
Yeah.
So it's a great pickup line, guys. Just go out there and start hitting girls in the head with a softball. You don't know where it'll take you.
You never know. But we didn't live in the same town. So for the first few years, we were long distance, and we wrote letters back and forth to each other. And yeah, our relationship just kind of grew from there. And then 4 years after the day we met, we married at the same spot where he hit me in the head with the softball. So
that's a fateful area, right?
Yeah, big turning points in her life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing where it'll lead you, right?
Right.
Like I said, I read your book, and you know what you guys talked about is really just it makes so much sense to me. So let's talk about your book, The Connection Codes. So when did you guys sort of come up with that? I mean, how did this happen? Was it when you got married, or was it later on in life?
Yeah, much later on. But let me say to begin, I mean, everything that you said about the Connection Codes book, I've read the thing, I don't even know, probably 25 times, and I'm mesmerized by it. And I'll run into the room and say, "Babe, let me read you this section." She's like, "Babe, we wrote that book. You can't get that inside." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's so powerful." And we're so passionate about all this because we get to live it. And we're just as stunned as anybody on the planet that this is just real. It just works. And even, as you said, it's so simple. And the reason it's simple is because it's based on the human condition. It's based on the human experience. You don't have to go learn Latin or learn the periodic table to be able to do this. This is already inside of us. And that's why we think it's so powerful, because you don't have to learn something new. You just have to relearn what you're already, we call it coded. You're coded with this from birth. And that's why it works across the board. We're in over 40 countries now, and it's cross-cultural. because it's the human condition. So it applies to everybody. So, but back to the question as far as how this started.
The book grew out of our own story. So as fun as it sounds, we were high school sweethearts, you would say. Our marriage really went downhill really fast, and we disconnected right away. I mean, even the honeymoon was just like a shocking disaster kind of thing, and we didn't recover for a long time. And I think that it kind of led us down the path of realizing that there's got to be more to it. You got to understand how we function as humans. And, we thought we had all the good groundwork to have a solid marriage. So we were pretty shocked that that's not the case, that it doesn't just happen so simply. And, for us, it was sadly decades into our marriage and the pain and the fighting and the hurting of each other and the not speaking for days that really led Glenn into all the research. So, this really came about almost 30 years after we were married. And now we've been married.
That's painful to say.
Yeah, it is painful. It is.
I would love to say we figured it out about 3 months in.
No, it took
was decades.
A long time. So, when Glenn was almost 50, he went back to school. He'd been a builder, contractor for many years. And at 50, he went back to school and went all the way to get his doctorate. And during that time had all this time for research that was required in his schooling.
And just for the record, that only happened because my wife made me quit working, which I just think, how many men do I know that can say, my wife made me quit working, but she did. And she realized I just wasn't geared for doing what I was doing. I worked hard and I kept us afloat, but I certainly wasn't gifted at it. But backing up just a little bit, the first 10 years of our marriage was horrific, just pain every day. And it's important to note that 24 hours before our wedding, we thought we were all set. And we're faith-based, so all the more so we're like, we've got God prioritized. So, and that's what we were told over and over again. Just put Jesus first. Everything will be a hunky-dory. And we were very, very active in our ministries, in our church. We were so involved, and we were clueless. We had no idea. And so 10 years in, we're just looking at all of this pain. And we got a little bit of help along the way and started getting a little bit of traction. Simultaneously, all of our friends started divorcing. We were fascinated by that. Initially, just out of morbid curiosity, we started asking questions like, well, what happened? And people would give the standard answers, we grew apart or we fell out of love. Well, the trick was, and I don't know if this is a spirit of God thing or not, but it led us to where we are today, that we would ask the follow-up question. We'd say, wait, you fell out of love. What does that mean? Like on a Thursday at 3:00? I mean, what do you mean you fell out of love?
Right.
You grew apart. So you grew together on the second date, the third date, the wedding day. At some point, what does that mean you started growing apart? And we just wanted to know. So we started hearing these themes with people. Well, that set me especially on a quest, which became a mission that's now our passion, because we finally figured out, again, after a couple of decades of effort, what causes people to disconnect. And that was stunning to me. And I always say I'm the educated one. Phyllis is the smart one. So I do all the hard work and then she figures out the obvious thing in front of her. And so once I figured all that out scientifically, I'm like, oh my gosh. And again, accumulating a massive amount of research, both my own and other people's, to realize this is what causes humans to disconnect in relationships. So then one day Phyllis goes, well, wait, if that's what causes them to disconnect, what isn't the opposite what causes them to connect? And I was like, well, yeah, I already knew that. That was obvious. I really didn't. So then we said, well, wait, what if we turn it upside down and do it the other way? And that is the beginning of what we now call the connection codes, because we now realize we know how to get Phyllis deeply connected with Glenn. We know how to get people deeply connected in their relationships.
Yeah, it's really amazing to me. A good portion of your book, it deals so much with recognizing and relaying your emotions with people. And I just don't think that we do that very well. And I don't really know why. Do you have any insight as to why do you think society is hiding their emotions in the first place?
Yeah. Well, great question. And, anytime we talk about human behavior, it's very difficult to prove anything or disprove anything because there's so many variables. But we can trace this back many centuries. This is not a new development. We actually have writings from way back to Augustine, Martin Luther, from a faith-based perspective, just talking about the evils of emotion. And, that's ungodly. You need to check your emotions at the door, set them aside. And so we're the great, 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 great granddescendants of these great teachers who had a lot of great things about them. Oh, great. Here goes the coughing.
That's all right. We'll edit that out. Don't worry.
We just had our floors redone, so we've inhaled 3 gallons of sawdust. But we're just still suffering from that, where people think that you're not supposed, your goal is to overcome emotion. Your goal is to learn how to suppress it, ignore it, step aside, whatever, and not let your emotions do the very thing that they're designed to do, which is to help you.
For most of us, it is a generational curse that just keeps getting passed down. Yeah. And that, this is what we learned as children, is to sit quietly, don't express, your discomfort, your need, your just cooperate, be quiet and cooperate. And, we've kind of, in some ways, just continue it. An unhealthy emotional state is what we continue to pass down. Maybe now younger parents may not be saying, be quiet to our children. Our children seem more active. Our grandchildren definitely seem more active. They're allowed to speak at the dinner table. But that doesn't mean that we've taught them what emotions are and how to find your emotions, to know that they are in your brain, that there's a part of your brain that houses emotions. Nobody talks about that. So it's just it's such a miseducation and a lack of education that we have, that we don't understand. We all have the same function when it comes to emotion. And so it's almost like we still believe that it's a thing that you control, you choose to be happy. Wow. You choose joy. You say no to sadness or to fear or to anger, instead of realizing, no, it's firing in your brain and we need to learn what to do with them.
Yeah. So, and the emotion is there regardless of whether you acknowledge it or not. And we think that we can get rid of it. We think we can resist it. You hear people all the time say, well, I've learned to control my emotions. No, you haven't. If a light bulb explodes over your head right now, you will feel fear. And you're responsible for your next action. You're not responsible for the emotion, though. The emotion is what happens to you. You're simply responsible for the next action. And younger generations, what I've witnessed, I'm a family therapist, so I see a lot of families, is that the parents, from a good heart, and I'm not trying to indict anybody, criticize them, but parents constantly give the message to their kids that they're okay. They'll say to them, the child cries, you're like, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Well, if the kid's okay, the kid wouldn't be crying. So apparently the kid's not okay. And the parents doing that out of their own pain experience, which I get that, but don't tell the child they're okay. The child will let you know when they're okay. The child will know when they're okay. But we do that out of genuine concern. It's a beautiful intention. It's just a bad application. And in reality, we need to be able to embrace the child's fear, the child's pain, whatever, and just be present with them and let them experience what they're experiencing.
Yeah, I definitely want to go into that a little deeper with you. When you started talking about the generational differences and things like that. And I'm a millennial, and I've noticed a few things about millennials. I feel, at least to an extent, that our generation is more open and willing to discuss mental health and, talk about the issues that are affecting us. Whereas older generations, I've got grandparents that are like, look, man, I was in Korea. I don't got nothing to cry about. You know what I mean? And it's like, how in your daily work, how often do you see those types of experiences with people, and how can the things that you see in the connection codes be implemented with them and have an impact on somebody that hasn't necessarily worked on their mental health very much at all?
Well, and what I see typically with younger generations is very much the macro. They believe that mental health should be talked about in the theoretical sense, but I don't see them actually doing that. I'm okay talking about your mental health and being kind to you, being gentle with you about your mental health, but I don't want to convey to you about my mental health. And again, it's out of fear, I think, typically for people that they're hesitant. Like, dude, I'm great with you conveying to me what your struggles are, what you're having trouble with, totally going to be safe for you. But I don't want you to know about my stuff. So typically, again, that's just been my experience, but typically people are great with it in the macro, the theory of it, but not so much in the micro, the actual implementing of it.
I got it.
With what you were saying, Chris, as far as the older generation, we've had a lot of amazing experiences with people in their 90s. And, everyone really wants to tell their story. They've just not been given permission to tell their story.
And the space.
And the safety to tell their story. Wow. And in a lot of ways with the connection codes, you're taught tools to interact with a 1-year-old and a 90-year-old. So the tools work in all age brackets. It's just the language. It's slowing yourself down and it's giving them space. And even the lingo, one of the things that we teach is using the phrase, what happened, what's happening, or what happens. And it's interesting when you're dealing with elderly people and you ask them that question, they will begin to tell their story. And also, a lot of people in that age bracket, because there's not a lot going on in life in general, they are oftentimes learners. They're interested in understanding things. And when you explain the science behind emotion and that they have the human right to have those emotions, it's almost, for some of them, it's the first time in their lives that they've been given permission to express the sadness, to express the anger, to express the loneliness. And when they understand that, that's firing in my brain and I have the right to say that, they actually begin talking. And to us, it's often amazing and in some ways shocking the amount of emotion that comes out. They reconnect with a 50-year-old, something that happened 50 years ago that brought pain to their life. And they are crying as they tell you about that hurt, that fear, that loneliness that they went through. Some of them go back even to their own childhood, which you're going back 80 years, but they are able to access that. And I think we just don't understand the power in our own bodies and our own minds, and that it's the same no matter what age you are.
I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, because it sort of ties into everything that you've been talking about. You guys said that you were married for, 30 years plus before you started delving into these things. And my wife and I, we've been married close to 20 years. And, we, over the Christmas break, we went on a road trip to see family, and it was, we had nothing else to do, so let's talk, right?
Oh, we love road trips. Oh my goodness.
After having read this book, it was so instrumental.
Wow.
We had this conversation that I had been holding on to stuff for 20 years that going back to what you were just saying about how people open up and they haven't been given the opportunity. I didn't even realize that I hadn't discussed this stuff, and I explained it to her. And then going back to what you were literally just talking about the reaction that people give to you.
Yeah.
It was so strange once I actually released that. I was like, I was like trying to hold her hand. I didn't know what to do. I felt like out of sorts.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it's really it's an intense feeling. It kind of amazes me that, like you said, somebody that's 90 years old, they've never sort of experienced that,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about your book, I love the portion about identity. And when I start talking about identity, people can go all over the place with what they already think identity is.
Sure.
But can you guys explain the concept of identity, how it's related in your book, and receiving identity? Because I thought that was really interesting. I think that's something that people might not necessarily, when they hear the word identity, they might not equate it with the way that you guys explain it in the book. Can you go over that a little bit?
Yeah, for a lot of people, especially the faith-based community, it becomes very threatening to say to them, you gain or lose identity. We're not talking about your identity with God, your relationship with God. That is steadfast, absolute, forever and ever. Hallelujah, amen. That's not something that vacillates. And I always equate it to my grandchildren. We have 10 grandchildren, and my relationship with each of them is solid. It's unmovable. They call me Papa. They call Phyllis Honey. So it's Honey and Papa. So if one of them comes running in and says, we have 3 8-year-old grandkids, and one of them comes running in and says, Papa, Haven's mad at me. I don't think she wants to be my friend. And I say to her, oh, it's okay. I love you. And she goes, well, Papa, I know that. I know you love me, but Haven doesn't want to play with me. She doesn't want to be my friend. I'm like, no, you're fine because I care about you. Your relationship with me is solid, absolute, and I'm always going to love you. Addie Kate wouldn't know what the heck I was talking about. She'd be like, I'm not questioning whether or not you love me. Haven is mad at me, and Haven doesn't want to play with me, and Haven doesn't want to be with me, and I feel sad. And if I'm insistent, I'm like, no, you shouldn't feel sad because I love you, and my love for you will always be there. It's steadfast, it's dependable, so you're okay. Well, that would be absurd. And Addie Kate would think something's wrong with Papa, that he doesn't understand what she's saying. She's having struggles with her cousin, who they're best friends, but they had a conflict. Something happened there. So Addie Kate is losing identity. She's losing the sense that she's valued by Haven, that she matters to Haven, that she's good enough for Haven. And those are kind of the working definition, what we call identity. Again, just the micro of it, the interworkings. I can lose identity with Phyllis. If I walk in the room, she's busy doing something, and I go, hey, babe, and she doesn't respond to me. Well, no, I know she's not about to divorce me. I know that she's not about to shoot me, but I lose identity. I mean, I literally feel like I'm falling, like, oh my gosh, she didn't respond. Again, I'm not saying I'm going to go jump off a bridge. I'm just saying in that moment, it feels weird to me because I said, hey, babe, and she didn't respond to me, and I began losing identity. And if we become familiar with that, we start recognizing, oh, that's what happens when we start losing each other. One or both of us start losing identity, and that's what started the rippling effect that we call it the cyclone. That's what sped up the cycle to become a cyclone that actually caused us to disconnect from each other.
If you think about identity in human relationships, it's like we're affected by everyone, not just our immediate family, but in our workspace. And so if you're in a work environment where you lose identity, a sense of self in all your interactions, you will not survive in that work environment very long. Yeah. Now, if someone else is like that doesn't work with you, is saying, oh, just buck up, and it's your attitude, and it's your problem, and you need to just be happy, and you need to be thankful, you can't counter that. It's like when you're in an environment where you are constantly losing a sense of who you are, you're going to have to change that environment. And sometimes we hold on to things like in a workspace because we think we have to, and we're dying. We're not flourishing. We're not growing. We are stagnant or dying because the relationships within that work environment are so negative and so toxic for us. And again, it's about how you experience. Sometimes in our own family of origin, we can be in a family with siblings, parents, and you are constantly being beaten down and your identity is constantly being chopped. And so you're not healthy in that environment. And you find yourself thinking, I have to get out of this. I have to do something different. Part of the beauty of understanding identity is that you can actually then, it's almost like you can stand back and look and go, oh, that's why I have such a hard time at Thanksgiving when we go to Uncle John's house, because Uncle John doesn't even act like I exist, and he's rude. And by the time I leave, I have to completely tell myself again, wait a minute, I'm a successful author. I'm a, whatever it is, like you have to remind yourself.
Yeah.
So because your identity has been questioned and it's been taken down so many notches. And I think we would understand ourselves better if we could go, that person gives me identity, but man, when I'm around that person, I really lose identity.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not allowed to go key the person's car. You're not allowed to go burn their house down. But yeah, you probably need to really, really limit how much you're involved with that person and maybe delete. I mean, if it's a workable scenario, maybe delete that person from your life. Again, don't be unkind to them, but you may have to go, I can't be around that anymore. And you're actually better off doing that, cutting that relationship off altogether. We sat with a family pre-holidays, and she said that when she's with her family, when she comes home, it takes her 3 to 5 days to recover from that experience. And we don't ever make that call for people, but we're like, maybe you should go be with your family for the holidays. Right. I mean, this is Christmas, for goodness sake, and you're ruining every Christmas for yourself because you go around a situation where you lose so much identity. She said, by the time I leave my family's home, I don't even have to open the door. I just ooze out underneath the door because I don't even exist anymore. I have no value. I have no identity, and I can barely breathe. It's just so brutal. Yeah.
And what's interesting, even with family scenarios, sometimes when you understand this concept, you can sometimes go into your family of origin and go, hey, mom and dad, or hey, your brother Bill, I lose so much identity when you X, Y, and Z, because sometimes it's not out of a bad heart.
Absolutely.
It's like the person doesn't realize, oh, my joking isn't funny to you. It actually
guts you.
Yeah. And, but so often we don't have the language to even be able to be honest enough with the people in our life to say, hey, that really hurts when you make fun of my job.
Yeah.
And I lose so much identity when you trash talk my job. And we don't have the language. And so we don't use the language to say that. And so we continue to just damage ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's part of the connection codes, is giving you a language, giving you the understanding, first of all, to understand all these things, and then to give you the language to use to be able to go into a situation, whether it's your boss at work or your family, to be able to go, this really hurts. And and to explain yourself. Now, not every place is safe. You can't always expect that they're going to respond lovingly or even hear you, but at least then it's like, okay, I have been honest and I've laid it out, and they still do not care, and they're not going to change the way this interaction goes. And so then and then you can choose differently.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. I just have to mention this one thing because it's so startling to me, and I couldn't believe it for years. And I researched the research a lot to try to figure out what does that mean. But research tells us that people will take up to a 38% cut in pay to work somewhere where they feel like they matter, where they receive identity, versus somewhere where they feel like they don't matter. And I'm thinking the math of that says this job is offering you $100,000 and you'll feel like crap at the end of every day. And you'll feel like you are useless and worthless and just a waste of skin, but you're making $100,000. This job over here will pay you $62,000. And at the end of every day, you'll walk out going, man, they really appreciate me. I matter there. I have value, and they're glad that I'm coming back tomorrow, and I make $62,000. That's a lot of money. But the research says that, people would rather make the $62,000 and receive identity and feel valued than to make the $100,000 and not, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, and I can guarantee you that person is going to be 100 times happier at that less paying job. It's really amazing. One of the things that I've learned in my short time here on Earth is that when dealing with jobs and things like that, time is so much more valuable than money. I worked for a job. I had a career in IT for about 15 to 16 years, and I won all these accolades. I mean, I was very well respected in my career. career path, but it got to the point where I was traveling 3 months out of the year and just
Wow.
was not enjoying my life, So
Mm.
I totally connect with that and understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to go back for a second because you guys mentioned that you all are faith based,
Uh-huh.
and first off, I love that. I love that this is something that you can implement, being whether you're a believer or not. But
Mm.
since you guys talk to so many believers, talking about something like you just brought up as an example with setting these boundaries with your families and things like
Mm.
that. So much of what we're taught in church is forgiveness and turn the other
Mm.
cheek and always forgive. Do you guys see any hesitancy or disconnect or anything like that? But when you're dealing with believers and people that are in your field or people that you're speaking with, what are your thoughts on that between setting up positive boundaries and dealing with that, forgive and forget type of mentality?
Yeah. Well, something that revolutionized my life not enough years ago. I'm sad to say it was less than a decade ago. And again, I always say I'm the educated one. Phyllis is the smart one. Every benchmark in our life, she's the one that has figured it out while I was over here trying to be brilliant. And she said to me one day, she said, "Babe, why do you pursue relationships with people who don't want a relationship with you?" And I gasped and I said, "Because we follow Jesus's example, and that's what we're supposed to do." She goes, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the right thing to do." And I thought my wife had, turned satanic on me or something, because I always thought that that's what you're supposed to do. And then our adult children got in on the conversation. They said, "Yeah, Dad, that's what you've always done. If somebody spits on you, you invite them over for dinner so they can spit on you in our home." And you
Yeah.
expend all of your time and energy on people who don't want to be your friends. And so you don't have any time and energy left over for people who actually like you, who would like to be your friend. That, again, stunned me and terrified me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is blasphemy here. But, and, we talked about scripture. Jesus said, if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn him the other way. Also, and Phyllis said, yeah, but don't go find him the next day. Say,
Right.
hey, remember that cheek slapping thing we were doing yesterday? You want to do some more of that today? And that's Phyllis's whole point. Is that's what you do. You expend all of this energy pursuing the people who are never going to be kind to you. Again, that revolutionized my life, because now I'm friends with people who are kind to me, and they get it that I'm a little odd, and they don't care. They are entertained by my quirkiness, but they like me and they're kind to me, and that's just stunning to me, because I didn't. No, and again, I'm not allowed to go key the person's car who's rude to me. I'm not supposed to be unkind to them, but I'm not supposed to pursue them. I'm not supposed to be in close relationship with them. I'm actually supposed to move away from them. That doesn't mean I don't go do acts of kindness. I do, but I do acts of service as an act of service. These are not my teammates. These are not my village. These are not my people that I live life with, because I can't, no one can survive that. No one can handle not receiving identity, not being connected deeply in their relationships.
I don't want to get too far away from the ideas in the Connection Codes book. I want to keep people sort of engaged. So, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and Misfits, if you're listening to this, and you can hear, I notice a lot when I pay attention to people's body language and pay attention to the way people communicate. And I love what you guys do. I think, Phyllis, I actually said it to you the first time I met you, that you guys, you communicate so effectively, and it's not just through speech, just like just now. One of the things that Dr. Glenn just said, what he just did is he said, and I wanted to talk about the concept of ooh, because that's been something that I didn't even realize that I struggled with. I thought I was just a very effective listener, and I was just, I was doing a great job. But that, can you explain the concept of ooh that's in your book? Because I think that is such a game changer as far as making the other person that you're discussing with feel validated.
Yeah, and so much of this, the things that resulted in the connection codes, they weren't just ideas we pulled out of a hat, just randomly selected one weekend around a campfire. These are things that we researched extensively to find out what worked. And what we started noticing is that when the person listening was audible, the other person responded differently. So then we started researching in that, and then we found out that the speaker's brain is actually tickled differently if the listener is audible. So it's not wrong, it's not evil to sit there and nod your head. We're not saying that you're a bad person because you're nodding your head. It just makes a difference when someone is audible. And we say that there are several dozen versions of the ooh. It's just something audible. Again, in the book, we list all these, different versions of it. Just something where the person cues in. And another thing in the book called the still face, because if you're not audible, it's real easy for the speaker to actually experience a still face, which is an unbearable human experience. So you may be completely tuned into them. You may be completely paying attention, but what they're experiencing is a still face, and they get overwhelmed very, very quickly. So again, that was just through a lot of research. We started watching, we started noticing, we call it the 3 phrases, the ooh, what's happening, I missed it. And again, those came out of a tremendous amount of research. The what's happening is scientific. We did that so many times that we're 100% convinced of that. There's a little bit of leeway on the I missed it, but to be able to convey to people, could you help me get that? I think I might have missed something there. Could you catch me up? I'm not quite tracking with you. I need a little bit of help getting what you're conveying there.
The beauty of the ooh is audible, yes, but it's also allowing space for what the other person is experiencing. And, I know for the many decades, the beginning of our marriage, it seemed like I would listen long enough to kind of know where Glenn was going, and then I would interject. I would either, feel like I had to defend myself, or I would try to, just take over the conversation with my own stories. And it is really a very ineffective way to communicate, where with the ooh, it gives you that other person. It's almost like I'm acknowledging that you're speaking to me, and I'm going to give you that space, and I'm not going to correct what you're saying. I'm not going to try to defend myself during your talking, but it's really it's like the audible listening of you matter, and I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And, that is, to me, been such a huge tool for us in our marriage, just to kind of realize we can both be watching the same movie. I'm experiencing it with sadness. Glenn is experiencing it with joy. So we are very different in how we're experiencing the exact same movie. And if we were talking about it afterwards, and we didn't use the ooh in the audible response to hear the other person, we would be so quick to judge. You'd be like, how could you have thought that was positive? That was such a sad movie. And then we'd have a big argument over something as simple as a movie. Yeah. And so it really does. It's like a piece of language that we have really not had in our toolbox of language. And so it's a beautiful way to learn to communicate with each other. And it's not validating. It's not like me saying, okay, I agree, and I totally get that you thought it was a sad movie. It's not that. It's just going, okay, I get that you thought it was sad. Our joy. I happen to think it was sad. And we both are allowed to view it and feel about it very differently.
Yeah. And we always say the ooh is not agreeing. It's just conveying that I hear you. I hear what you're conveying. I may not agree with you. I may not experience it the same way as you, but I hear that that's what was happening with you in that setting.
Yeah, it's really sort of the spirit of affirmation, really, is how I see it. My wife and I, we ran into the exact same issue. We had a very similar type of conversation style as well. But one of the things that it helped us recognize is that what I was hearing that she was saying, a lot of the times I was taking it the wrong way. And I've always felt that we had a very good communication style, but we were good at talking. We weren't so good at listening to each other, and it really helped us. I mean, I think that anytime, I think just that short period of time where you're allowing the other person to recognize that not only do you hear what they say, but you understand what they say. I think we need to just sort of take a a step back sometimes and slow down the conversation and slow down so it doesn't result in this jumble or an argument or something like that,
Yeah. Well, let me just point out, Chris, not to diverge too much from what you said, but when you say affirming, even you're affirming the relationship and the interaction, not necessarily what the person said, not necessarily the content, not necessarily the information that they conveyed. And also, it doesn't necessarily convey that I understand. Phyllis shares things with me all the time where I don't understand. That doesn't make a bit of sense to me. And I assure you, many times I convey things to Phyllis where she's like, she can't even touch that. It's in a very different universe than what I experience. I'll just fast forward and give you an idea. I deal with a number of psychological disorders personally. And for example, I don't like to step on cracks. Phyllis is not able to walk and care about cracks. She knows she's not going to fall through. It's not going to be the end of the world. Well, I feel pain. I feel fear every time I step on a crack. I just don't like it. You can tell me to stop feeling pain and stop feeling fear. I'm not trying to feel pain. I'm not trying to feel fear. I just do. Well, Phyllis can't even grasp that. That doesn't exist in her universe. So she doesn't understand it, but she can ooh me and go, oh, wow, okay, I hear you. I get what's happening with you. Phyllis, don't experience it the same way, but I get it that happens for you. And she's able to be present with me in that, and the ooh conveys that really beautifully.
Yeah, that was a fantastic explanation, actually. I mean, that it definitely, like I said, I have found since doing this that it creates such a deeper bond with each of us. When you can actually, like you said, not it's not necessarily it's not even a rule in your sport, so to speak, but you can at least understand why that sort of thing affects you. So that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I wanted to discuss with you all was the core emotion wheel. It's a tool that you all have, and you don't have to go through everything in the core emotion wheel, because Misfits, I think you should go check out their website. You can find information about all this stuff on there. But when you're implementing this core emotion wheel, can you go over just the emotions that you discuss in the core emotion wheel, and sort of why you would want to use that?
Yeah. Well, part of the history of that grew out. My mother's a psychologist, and she lives with us. She's 94 years old, remarkable human being. But she gave me a book one time that she had used in the 70s in the psychology course, and it listed, I think it was 134 emotions that they would open the book and show it to somebody and say, here, what are you feeling today? 134, it's going to take me 45 minutes to narrow it down.
Right.
Forget it. We don't have the time for that. So what we now know from brain scanning is that there are 5 neural regions. There's only 5. There's 2 of those regions that we divide up to come up with the 8 core emotions: anger, fear, guilt, hurt, loneliness, sadness, shame, and joy. I always feel fear that I'm missing one in there.
I do the same thing.
Now, for goodness sake. But anyway, I think I was close. But that's just the human condition. That's the human experience. Every human on the planet experiences those. And the beauty is every human on the planet knows those. I can go to anywhere in the world, if I'm able to convey in the language, and say to them, I feel fear about this, and they know what I mean. If I say to them, I feel stressed, they may or may not know what I mean by stressed. If I say I feel anxiety, if I say I feel overwhelmed, it's not wrong to say those things, but it doesn't tune them in like the 8 core emotions do. And if you convey the core emotion to people, they get it. They know what's happening for you in that moment.
So we created the wheel kind of to help us tune back into our own brain.
Right.
And for me, it was life-changing because I appreciated the science. Because I definitely was raised believing that you choose emotion, you opt out of emotion, you put emotion aside. Wow. I did not understand for 1 minute that my brain had 5 neural regions that housed emotion. And so far, I have found very few people who actually know that science. And for me, the science, it's all it took. I'm like, okay, there's no arguing here. And I'm curious enough that I want to know what's going on in my brain. And so the core emotion wheel was just something we designed to help people tune into their own brain. If we all had brain scanners at our home, we could just plug ourselves up, maybe at breakfast, lunch, and dinner and go, oh, look at what I felt today. Yeah. But we don't have that at this moment, that luxury. And so we kind of have to tune into ourselves and figure out, okay, what's happening with me? And so this tool was designed for that. And it works incredibly when you use this tool with another person. Amazing to get to the heart of what's happening with people. When you use those tools, even with a stranger, it's like you just cut through so much and you get to hear from them what's very real and raw. And it's a really cool tool to use.
Yeah. And it's designed to take 4 minutes if it's two people doing it, 2 minutes each. So it's very fast.
Yeah.
And it literally can change your connection, change your relationship, change your interactions in 4 minutes a day, which is stunning. That was part of our mission, part of our dream. If you say to somebody, do this for 45 minutes a day and it'll help you. Well, very few people have the discipline, the time, the energy, the focus to do something. And we connection coders say, you brush your teeth every day, you do the core motion wheel every day. It just takes 4 minutes. Just do it. And if we tell you it's 4 minutes, you'll probably be able to manage it before you go to bed tonight. If we tell you it's 20 minutes, you're not going to do it. You're certainly not going to do it every day. But what we're trying to do is reconnect you. We call it brain retraining. We're trying to retrain your brain. We call it retraining because you did this well when you were 15 months old. You just got reprogrammed along the way, but never recoded. We're trying to retrain your brain to recognize the emotion. For Chris tomorrow to be able to walk into the room and say to his partner, "Ooh, babe, I felt hurt a couple of minutes ago by what you said. Yeah, I felt some pain. I felt some hurt." Again, we're not indicting his wife. We're not saying she's evil or bad or wrong or anything. She may have done everything beautifully. But in that moment, for whatever reason, Chris felt pain. He just did. We can tell him to stop it. We can tell him not to feel pain. Chris, you stop that. You stop feeling pain. And we can tell him to shut up about it, which he eventually will. But we haven't connected with him. Or we can just ooh him and go, oh, so what was happening with the hurt there? What did I miss? And literally we're inviting him into his own experience. So the core emotion wheel is designed to retrain you to do that in real time. Because again, when we were 15 months old, we were so authentic all the time. I remember that about you, Chris. It was before you had a beard. You were so authentic. 3 o'clock in the morning. It was so annoying. 3 o'clock in the morning, you were authentic. You let us know your needs all the time. You never waited until 7 a.m. when we felt like actually answering your needs.
Yeah.
But you're coded that way. You're supposed to do that.
So once you do the whole core emotion wheel, what comes next after that? Do you have any insight as to, okay, you've displayed these emotions, you've talked about it. Is there anything that you can sort of do to recognize in the future so that you can deal with these things in the future, aside from just recognizing the emotions? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, but again, if you think about a 1-year-old, what are we trying to do with them after they process the emotion? Nothing. Just live life. Right. We want them to convey to us, again, whatever the need is, hunger, fear, a dirty diaper. Well, believe it or not, we kind of need to know about that. We just need them to be authentic and convey what's happening with them, convey their need. Well, we just had a bunch of birthdays. Hopefully we got potty trained. But we just had a whole bunch of birthdays, but we never changed as far as our need to convey need. So I'm just wanting Chris to be able to turn to his safe people and process what's happening with them. Again, in real time. The core emotion wheel is used as a training tool to do it in real time.
It is quite the journey. For most of us, we have not done this well. And tuning in to your emotions. So using the wheel as a tool to tune in every day. And then it's kind of a exercise that needs to become a way of life. But it takes really intentionality to say, you know what, I'm going to do this until I am so good at it that I no longer need the actual wheel. I can just speak this language with everyone around me. I immediately notice when I am hit with fear. I immediately notice when I'm feeling sad. I immediately notice when I'm when I hurt is firing, I need to express that to that person that's right in front of me that I'm experiencing hurt with. And once you start down this road, it's like you use the tool to reawaken yourself to what's happening in your brain. And then you start realizing that, okay, now that I'm tuning in, it's almost like it opens up a whole new world of realizing, you know what? I have needs. I have actually felt, I had an experience during the summer. We were at the beach with our oldest daughter, and I tend to totally avoid the ocean. I love the sand. I love walking on the beach. I love sitting on the beach. I love the sunsets, but I am not one to play in the water. And my youngest daughter said, "Mom, what's happening for you that you won't get in?" And I tuned into myself and I said, "What is happening with me?" And I realized that I had tremendous fear of sharks and jellyfish. And my daughter, who is a connection coder, just oohed me. "Oh, yeah, Mom, I get that. Wow." And then just acknowledging, I felt like I had released a lifetime of fear of the ocean. And nobody would have guessed it because I love going to the beach. Yeah. But then I was like, you know what? I'd like to get in the water. And Glenn joined us, but first it was my daughter. And she was so precious because she says, "Mom, I won't leave your side." Oh, wow. And, she could have given me a long, "Oh, Mom, you know how rare it is for sharks to actually attack?" She didn't do that. She just kept the space I needed for my fear. Like, she did not try to tell me how silly that was or try to reassure me that everything's okay. She just went, "Oh, yeah, I get that." And then as I wanted to get into the water, she stayed close beside me, and it was really sweet. And then Glenn came out, and I spent a whole week. They could barely get me out of the water because...
Okay, I just have to talk about that because, and it's just so powerful to me to think this precious person for decades, okay, not a weekend, for decades, wouldn't get in the water because fear blocked her from that. And she wasn't trying to feel fear. She wasn't planning fear. And this is why we say people don't control their emotions. She wasn't doing this on purpose. No one had ever asked her what happens for her. I had never asked her what happens. It was our youngest daughter that said, "Mom, what happens for you there?" She processed the fear. That doesn't mean that it all goes away necessarily. I don't know. This girl is like a 5-year-old in the ocean for days. And we were in there. I was withered by the end of several days. But she couldn't stop talking about how amazing the beach was. And she said, "This is like going to the spa. This is just amazing." She just was flooded with joy, but she had never processed the fear. And no one had ever asked her what happens for you there. So it's just startling to me to think this has so much effect. My gosh, this is huge. And this is a brilliant woman. I mean, she's so dynamic in so many ways, but she had been blocked from this enjoyment for decades just because she was flooded with fear about the experience.
Well, and I believed that I was being smart. I'm the smart one to stay out of danger. It's only fools that get in the water. And, and so when I began to release and saw the power of that, it's like you go down a journey of now I'll be 60 this year. And it's like, gracious,
you'll be 60.
Yeah, I'll be 60 this year. So, as an almost 60-year-old, I'm tuning into myself going, I deserve to process who I am, to say, absolutely. I have needs and I have pain points, and I've just ignored all of that because to be, what I defined as to be a powerful woman who can run a business and grow an empire, you do not have time for emotion. And it was a lie because I'm just as powerful today, but I'm actually listening and tuning into myself. So it's a journey that you begin once you unlock and tune back in to what's happening for you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And like I said, I mean, I said it a couple seconds ago, just from a simple conversation in a car ride, I didn't know what to do. But it's like you unlock an entire new portion of your life that you didn't know was there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you know, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think that's going to impact a lot of people too, because I'm sure there's a million people out there that are just they're going through the exact same thing right now. They don't know what they don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you hadn't been in the water for ages because you were horrified of sharks. Well, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's not really willing to take that next step in their financial plans, or not really willing to go out on a limb and try something new that they've been thinking about trying. I mean, it's so important. I started this journey in podcasting as well. And, you know, I thought about doing it for like a year and a half, 2 years before I actually pulled the trigger and just said, I'm just going to go do it. And it's been a game changer for me. I mean, this whole thing's been it's been so great for my mental health, so great for my, my enthusiasm towards the things that I do. I mean, it's amazing. So when you unlock that potential that you didn't know that you have, oh man, it's a game changer. So thank you for sharing that.
Wow.
You know, you mentioned this is something that you can do whether you're 90 years old or you're 1 year old. Now, I'm gonna say this. This one is a little bit for me, but I've got a 2-year-old. And do you have any tips for explaining the core emotion wheel or going through the core emotion wheel with your children? Because emotions are so hard in my household right now for my son.
Well, it is amazing. We have so our oldest daughter has 5 children, and 2 years old all the way up to 16. And she co-authored the book with us. And so we do have a lot of information for how to implement this into parenting. And, you know, with a 2-year-old, you're teaching them language, you're teaching them words, you know, you're teaching them body parts, you're teaching them, you know, how to identify objects. And in all of that, it's you using the words of emotion they actually understand. If you're able to say, what's happening for you, buddy? And, you know, a parent of a 2-year-old actually told us a story of leaving the park. And the 2-year-old always has a complete temper tantrum meltdown because they don't want to leave the park to go home. And this dad said, you know what? I decided to apply the core emotion wheel and the tools, all the language you've taught us. And he said, you know, when my son started crying, I go, oh man, yeah, buddy, I know it's so sad that we have to leave. And his 2-year-old actually stopped fighting and crying and looked at his dad in the face like, oh my word, it's like the dad was following the energy. He was not resisting the energy. He wasn't trying to correct his son or punish his son for his, you know, temper tantrum. He was like, oh, buddy, I know it's so sad that we have to go home. And I feel sad because it's been a beautiful day. And all of a sudden they start talking, like in the baby language of a 2-year-old, about the joy points of being at the park. And before he knew it, they were holding hands, walking back to the car. And he wrote us an email about it because he was like, that was the craziest experience ever. So these tools are very much, they can work within your home. And, you know, if you, Chris, in particular, are just kind of lost in it right now, I would highly recommend, we have different e-courses, and one is on parenting, and it's with our daughter. So the 3 of us are doing this e-course. But I think that one really does give so many stories and examples of how to practically use these tools. But, you know, that for most of us, we got to start with ourselves. Like we have to get comfortable with the language. We have to get comfortable of even the words, you know, to be able to say to our child, you know, what's happening, buddy? Are you sad? I'm sad. I feel fear, like acknowledging their fear. It's kind of like, it's got to be your language to be able to teach them that language.
Yeah. We hear that from parents a lot, that just like with this young dad, that he said, I'd been resisting my son's energy for so long. Every time we left the park, I resisted his energy. And I told him that he was okay and that we're going to come back to the park again and to stop having a bad attitude and stop being ungrateful and on and on and on. And he said it always escalated. It made it worse, worse, worse. And he said the first time I followed my little boy's energy and I was just present with him, I oohed him. He cried. I said, oh, yeah, I get that. Yeah, that is sad, 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 sad. And he said, I couldn't believe watching this. He said, probably within 20 seconds, my son was completely transformed. And he still feels sad. It's not that he doesn't feel sad about leaving the park. He does. But he's in his right mind now, whereas previously he would go ballistic and scream. And, it was a major war. And now he was able just to get in the car and they went on their way, which does not mean that the little boy's not going to feel sad the next time they leave the park. He might. Okay, that's fine. We'll just process that too.
It really does change your parenting.
Yeah.
We could tell just story after story. Once these concepts make sense to you as the parent,
Right.
you will see your child differently,
Yeah.
which is a really cool thing. There was a mom that told a story. They were visiting very wealthy friends that had beautiful manicured lawns and a pool. And she had stepped inside to grab something, and their little 2-year-old was still outside, and she turned around and he was holding a beautiful plant from the roots in his hand of flowers. And she said that before connection codes, what she would have done was immediately started, in a sense, telling him how wrong he was and how bad he was, and, would have probably, punished him. But she, in that moment, remembered the connection codes, and she said, oh, buddy, what's happening? And he just big eyes and teared up, and he said, Mommy, flowers for you. And she realized that out of this beautiful overflow of love, he was trying to pick flowers, but the whole plant came out. And so she said, I reacted so differently. And she said it was a beautiful moment of connecting. She said, I did teach him not to pick flowers in someone's yard, but she said, I didn't have that normal reaction of just immediately assuming the worst and yelling at him.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful interchange instead of the normal of what she would have done.
Yeah, and even for her to realize it was actually a joy motivation. He was picking these flowers because he loves his mom.
Right.
He wasn't doing it to cause trouble and be mischievous and destroy things. He actually was doing it because he cares about his mom. And in the process, he yanked up the freshly planted landscape.
Yeah.
But he didn't know that. He's 2 years old. He's just like, oh, look, I love my mom. Here's some beautiful flowers. I'll take them to her.
That's just sweet too. My son is very similar to that. He does the same thing, and he'll pick up like roses off one of our rose bushes or something like that. And I want to take this to Mama. He said that a couple times. So it's amazing how simplified that is, and I don't know where that goes as we get older, but I wanted to touch on something you mentioned way back earlier in the beginning of the podcast. So you mentioned that you're a certified sexologist, which I'm not going to lie, that sounds like pretty much the most amazing job title from the but,
I won't argue with you on that.
But what made you want to get into that field? Aside from what I can, only assume are just the best pickup lines for your wife you ever could come up with. I'm a doctor, lady.
I mean, when we, on our honeymoon, on our wedding night, we disconnected relationally over sex. And then as time progressed, we had a horrible, horrible sexual relationship. That's a long, fascinating story. But then we're 10 years in, as I mentioned before, we start asking people what happened that their marriages dissolved. And virtually everyone, there was a sexual component to it. There was a sexual element to it. And so that really sparked my interest. I was like, wow, this sex thing is not just us. This sex thing seems to be everybody.
Yeah.
And so again, there wasn't a business plan or a mission statement, but just initially it organically grew. And so over time, I'm just like, man, I got to study this. What is happening here? And especially being faith-based, being in a church setting where nobody's talking about this. I mean, nothing. There's not one sentence said. And, over the decades, some churches do say, oh, God designed sex, and, then they wish you well and you're on your way. And I'm like, okay, what do we do with that? And, of course, you had the purity culture that, I think had great intentions and had some really, really intense repercussions for people. So I just thought nobody's talking about this. So we have to, and of course, simultaneously, I was born in the 60s, the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And so tons of people were talking about sex, but not really sex in a covenant relationship. They're just talking about sex randomly and rampantly. So I thought there's got to be a healthy perspective here. So that became more and more my focus, where I was like, we have to get a handle on this. We certainly personally, but also for so many people, because we saw so many people drowning in it. And even today, young couples, newlyweds, are just as clueless. They have more exposure to sexuality, but they really don't have a clue how to connect sexually. And so that became my mission, because I felt like we had to have some voices. And again, as we started getting connection in our relationship, I was like, this would be cool if we could actually spread this culturally, so that people didn't feel, because basically our whole mentality, sorry to get going on this, it just lights me up. Our mentality basically is you're hot and heavy, you're excited, this couple, boy and girl meet and they're just so thrilled. But everybody knows, we even have phrases, oh, the honeymoon's over, which most honeymoons are not successful anyway, but let's pretend they are. So the honeymoon's over. So there's just a mentality that this relationship is going to dissipate over the next, pick a number, 6 months, 2 years. And then they're at some level of just blahness, and their status quo and their goal is just to be committed. And I think what a rotten way to have a basis for a relationship. We would never do any other relationships like that is just based on commitment. And I always say, I'm not committed to Phyllis. I'm addicted to Phyllis. I'm enthralled with Phyllis. I'm mesmerized by Phyllis, and it's self-perpetuating, but I'm not committed to her. Now, way under there somewhere, I guess there's commitment. If Phyllis was in a car wreck and in a coma for 3 years, I'm not hoping for that, but I would show up every day because I am in this. I wouldn't be receiving anything back from her for 3 years. But I don't want to live my life that way. I don't want to base my whole relationship premise just on commitment. That sounds like, here's a stick, just bite down on it and bear it, and I was mad at God. By the time I got back from our honeymoon, I was like, are you kidding me? I just signed a 70-year contract, and I'm already not happy with what's happening here. I was 20 at the time, so I'm like, it could be a 70-year contract. Shoot. That's a long time. I don't know how long 70 years is. I was only 20. So, this is intense. So anyway, I just felt there had to be some avenue where people could get some help in this area.
Yeah, when I was a kid, we had this book called Everybody Poops, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but anyways, so there was the concept should be the same as we get older, and in a loving relationship, in a marriage, it's sex is just the reality of the thing. But I understand how it can be an uncomfortable thing to talk about. You mentioned purity culture as well. How hard is that topic to discuss with believers? And, why do you think that is?
Of course, in our circles, people want us to come and talk about this topic because they know that we're willing to talk about this topic, especially in a very positive way. There are definitely some voices out there in the Christian culture that are still feeling like they have to make sure that everybody is doing it right. As in, don't cross this line. And they've created a lot of lines, and they are convinced that they're lines that, God has created. And so, a lot, to me, the people that come to us are kind of like almost going, we love God, but we don't want those people because we know it's their opinion that they're just telling us that, don't cross this line, don't cross that line. And so we're just able and willing to talk about it in some ways from a scientific point of view, just kind of the anatomy differences between men and women. And it's very helpful. So often our audiences are married people when we're talking about this topic. And it's amazing how many of them we hear from after who go, wow, you just blew our minds and you opened up for us a topic that we have been participating in, but not with the knowledge and not with understanding and with a lot of hurt and a lot of confusion. So, I think that I would say it is still not talked about in churches. Yeah. And as in our lifetime, I'm not sure it has changed a whole lot from when we first got married 40 years ago to where it is now. I don't know that dating couples are getting the instruction they need. I don't know that engaged couples are getting the instruction they need. As a church as a whole, it's like we're still not talking about it.
Guys, this has been so good to hear. I am truly being honest when I say this, that, like I said, your book and the principles inside of it have really been a game changer for myself and my family. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down and talk with me. I want people to find out more about you. So where can people find out more? Do you guys have a social media, or where's your website, or what's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So if you are on social media, Instagram at Connection Codes is wonderful way to get new content, videos, and all of that through Instagram is great. It goes to our Facebook as well. We engage more on Instagram as far as if you're messaging us, we engage more on Instagram. But all the content is the same on Instagram and Facebook. Our website is connectioncodes.co. And right off the bat, it will invite you to a 3-day free event, which is a wonderful way to just get some of the basic foundation of what all we've been talking about. So it is a great place to start on our website. It's just to go ahead and go there, sign up for the free 3-day event, and it will just help you to understand kind of the journey that you can go on. And there's a lot more on the website, but that's really the best place to start.
Well, Misfits, go check them out. I like I said, I am being 100% genuine when I say this has truly helped me very much. So thank you again for coming on. We're getting down towards the end of the episode, and at the end of every episode, I like to put my guests like a deer in the headlights. I'm going to hit you with this question real quick. So it's one question, 2 parts. What was the last goal that you all completed, and what's the next goal that you want to set for yourself?
Well, number one, let me just say that we're not very good at celebrating goals. I think we as a culture are not, but these two especially, our whole Connection Codes team are not. So that's a great question. It's very helpful. We actually have a board where we are required by our team to write down regularly things that we are achieving. In the last few months, we've published the Connection Codes book. We've presented the Connection Codes e-courses. So there's a long list of things that we are doing now, which, again, I'm always looking at the next thing, and I have trouble slowing down to celebrate that. But that's been really, really powerful for us.
Well, what I thought he was going to say was that last year he had a goal of walking 1,000 miles.
What?
And he did it. He did it in December. Matter of fact, we were at the mall doing some Christmas shopping. So it was before Christmas. And, when you're really intent on goals like he is, he knew it was the day. So we woke up that morning and I don't know if it was raining or cold or whatever, but I was like, well, babe, we're going to be at the mall. And so we were done shopping, and he was like, babe, I've only got X amount of steps left. We got to stay in the mall. And so he finished his 1,000 miles, and we took pictures, and we posted it all over, sent it to our kids, posted it on Instagram that he had reached his 1,000 miles. So we definitely love that and believe in that. And so that's kind of a personal. And, for me, I have been real intentional in setting goals to read a book, what do you say? Not Audibles, not Kindle, but like a hard copy book in my hand, kind of going back to the old school.
What are those things anymore?
I know. But that's a goal that I've achieved, is really getting back into reading. It's a 20-minute a day goal. And so I've really finally made it so much so that it's more now a habit than even, it went from I had to set a goal and then started doing it, would finish one, start another one. And now it's really more of a habit. But so reading books has gone back into my goals. And then right now, as far as a new goal is, I'm doing kind of a breathing kind of, that's been one of my goals, is a daily breathing exercise. And I'm in the middle of that one. So that's kind of a new goal that I'm really leaning into. Do you have a new goal to share?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of connection codes.
I know, but this is personal. Let's say personal goals.
Well, I haven't read 2 books a month in a long time, and I already read 2 books in January. So that's one of my goals this year, is to read 2 books a month. So that's been a blast.
2 books you hold in your hand.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, you're on track. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I know you guys are super busy and you're all over the place. So, is there anything that you want to promote in the future or anything like that? Where can people come see you?
Well, I love that. Thanks, Chris. There's a lot happening, most like February even coming up, where we have another free event that is on February 10th that is online. But you have to sign up for it. But it's, Sex Dates 101. So if you want to hear more about that topic, then be sure and register on our website, connectioncodes.co, for that event. And that event is happening February 10th. The next live event is in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you happen to be anywhere in the area, that is a 2-night event. So you can find that on our website as well. And it is open to the public. So it's a free event that's being hosted by a group in Nashville. So there's lots of ways to stay connected and to find out what we're doing, especially through social media.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Misfits, you know what to do. Go check them out. Connectioncodes.co is their website. @ConnectionCodes on Instagram. We'll put all that stuff down in the show notes down below. But truly, you guys, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap this show up. Misfits, thank you very much for listening, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you. Well, Misfits, we did it. That's our episode. I want to thank you so much for listening, and thanks again to our sponsors. If you want to support any of the sponsors of this podcast, there are affiliate links on the sponsors tab of our website over at www.misfit-heroes.com. You can also find links to all of our social media there, so follow us for immediate up-to-date info about the podcast. Please, if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to help me out, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button down below so you're notified of new episodes as they're released, and make sure to leave a rating or review of the show on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Truly, Misfits, I love you. Thank you so much for listening. And until the next episode, be kind, love one another, and be a hero.